We attended two gender diversity and inclusion conferences last year. The first one was in New Delhi and the other in New York. The experiences, issues and solutions discussed at both these events were almost identical in tone and content. There was just one critical difference. The Indian event was in its first edition and the American one was in its 20th. It was evident that the needle was indeed stuck, and that set us thinking about what it would take to get this needle moving again.
The simplest yet most intelligent framework of diversity and inclusion that we have come across in recent times is the one by Verne Myers, where she states that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. In general, you tend to see an overemphasis in D&I programs on the D rather than on the I. And even within the D, there is an overemphasis on the representation of numbers rather than on the representation of differences. And if that is the problem, then here is our take on the solutions.
Stuck in the Middle is probably the most appropriate title for the subject of the leaking gender pipeline. For example, in India, we see a sharp drop from 29% women in junior manager roles to about 9% in middle-level manager roles. So if the problem is in the middle, let's get real and set our primary targets there. The targets for the top and bottom are easily derived from this one target. And what should this target be? Find out the percentage of women in your country's educated urban workforce. Don't you think that the same proportion should hold true for the middle layers of your organization as well? For example, in India, this is 22%, and that's just the minimum proportion of women that organizations in India must have in their middle layers.
At one point of time or another, some of us will be constrained in hiring an increasing number of women because of situations or plans that warrant low headcount growth. Even when that be the case, we can always bring in more women's voices and minds. Borrow women expats from your global centers that find it easier to hire women. Split some jobs into two. Get the work done via part-time arrangements or job sharing and bring in two voices and minds instead of one. Keep ready a pool of women returning to careers as project interns or contractors who could occupy vacant positions as they spring up. Increase the number of women consultants and business partners, and again you get more voices and minds. Once in a while, try women-only engagement surveys and based on their feedback, implement organization-wide action plans. Institute shadow management teams like political parties have shadow cabinets and have equal representation of men and women in them. Increase women's representation in important projects and initiatives. This list could go on.
Functions like sales and manufacturing find it the most difficult to increase their female representation. To them we would say a few things. First, if the armed forces of even traditional countries can do it by finding some women for combat roles and by offering responsibilities to many women for part combat and non-combat roles, so can you. Second, in India, you may take comfort from the fact that comparable countries like China, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and in some pockets even Pakistan, have better female representation in similar industries and functions.
The sharp drop in female workforce participation between 26 to 35 years of age is called the defeminization of the workforce. If you plot a graph, it resembles the letter M. The peaking of familial responsibilities isn't the only reason for this. What is lesser known as a reason is that with the growing prosperity of a family unit, there is decreased need for the women to work. Growing prosperity generally moves people away from needs to desires and choices. That's true for women and men. For example, India is seeing this trend with the female workforce participation rate dropping from 34% in 2010 to 29% in 2014. Therefore, engagement and retention programs for everyone in general and women in particular have to address desires and choices. Have you found yourself wondering why your child or spouse doesn't always seem happy even after you have provided for all the needs? The second implication of the M-shaped curve is that the supply of female talent increases again and experiences a second peak after the age of 35 years. Career comeback or returnee programs that are thoughtfully offered at this stage could provide a fantastic advantage to organizations. Research data shows that only 5% of the returnees wish to come back to their old organizations. Shocked? The upside of this statistic is that this may just be a cracker of an opportunity to get diversity into your organization by attracting returnee talent from other organizations. Not only do you get numbers, you also get different.
It would be fair to say that we experience diversity and inclusion the most during our time at college. That is because colleges and universities promote diversity and inclusion for remaining relevant and making progress. They know that diversity is for quality and not just for equality. Therefore, they work towards diversity by design and don't just get in more numbers. They have wider definitions of merit that include a variety of knowledge, abilities, and orientations. Companies, on the other hand, make the mistake of using old and narrow definitions of merit to view the future and of viewing diversity and inclusion as an affirmative action for equity. Obviously, then, they grapple with the question, will affirmative action adversely impact our merit? Colleges and universities move ahead with D&I even without affirmative action. It shows in their selections, their examinations, and their grading.
One of the striking features of the 2012 London Olympics was the way in which the administrative and volunteer staff reflected the capital city's diversity. Stephen Frost, erstwhile head of diversity and inclusion of the organizing committee, believes that the world of business can learn from that Olympic experience. The committee conducted group interviews and on many occasions selected entire teams. Though they admittedly did that to save time, they got cohesive and excited teams with diverse individuals and a variety of strengths. An individual by himself or herself is not diverse or different. It is when he or she is seen with respect to others that their diversity becomes apparent. We would do well by marrying this insight into our selection, promotion, and reward mechanisms, which by and large seem to focus on the individual and are rarely, if ever, focused on the team.
The litmus test for any gender diversity and inclusion program or policy is the question, does this manage to increase the attractiveness of my organization for women without much decreasing it for the men? If the answer is yes, then go ahead, and if the answer is no, then do not. Many programs that are purely of women, for women, and by women may not pass this test. But a creative twist to the employee referral scheme will. For every successful referral of a man or woman, pay X. For every successful referral of a man plus a woman, pay 3x. It is quite possible that you may get lesser opposition and better results from this scheme than if you were to pay X for every successful referral of a man and 2x for every successful referral of a woman. For best results, involve lots of men in finding solutions to the problems currently faced. They have mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, and women friends and are more than happy to help make the world a better place for them. Association increases advocacy, so the more associations you create, the more the advocacy will move. It is when the majority begins to speak for the minority that social movements really begin to take off.
men feel the lack of diversity and inclusion during their work lives as much as the women do. When people are sarcastic about the more successful bosses and peers, they're also voicing an opinion against stereotypes. When people feel stifled by an organization's culture, they're also experiencing the ills of homogeneity. Strike at the heart of stereotypes and homogeneity if you have to make progress with diversity and inclusion, for men and for women.
It is with a sense of déjà vu that I would participate in company town halls where not a single opposing voice would be raised on the subject of gender diversity, only to be hit by an onslaught of cynical, critical and emotional voices on the same topic at the coffee break thereafter. Why are there two parallel and contradictory conversations going on? The subject of gender diversity elicits deep-rooted socio-cultural reactions from within us, reactions that sometimes we are not even aware we possess. There is a formal study called the reaction to diversity that segments people into positively, neutrally, and negatively disposed to the concept. And to no one's surprise, there are as many women who are negatively predisposed as there are men. It is a very real probability that there are deeply polarized groups in your organization, and unless you create a safe space for their differences to spill out before they move towards resolution, no real progress will happen.
And after all this, if you're still stuck for ideas, you could look, learn and borrow from successes in the other streams of diversity and inclusion, those relating to ethnicity, disability, generations, etc. For example, organizations that seek to do well with the disabled break jobs into their essential and non-essential elements. Then they list the basic physical and mental abilities required for the essential elements of the job. It turns out that there appear more jobs whose essential elements could be done by disabled people than what everyone had previously imagined to be. Another example is that organizations that seek to manage a multi-generational workforce ensure that their policies and programs address each generation or all of them. They also have processes that promote intergenerational collaboration. Try a trick. In this presentation, replace the word gender with ethnic or generational, and you'll find that every bit still holds true.
Bigger than the waste of women dropping out of the workforce is the waste of women not joining the workforce in the first place. In Rebecca Schambaugh's words, it's not a glass ceiling that is holding women back, it's the sticky floor. In India, only 1 out of 3.5 women joins the workforce at all. So efforts to move the needle on gender diversity would be incomplete without significant work here. There are examples of organizations, specifically in the IT and research sector, that are stepping out into their communities and working with young women to create awareness and joy around a career in their industry.
In this video, there are suggestions and ideas on both giving the uniform to more women as well as getting more of them into the game. We hope that you will try out some or all of them in your organization, irrespective of where you are in the gender diversity and inclusion journey, and watch the needle shift yet again.
Reach us at traininggrey.com for your grey HR issues and greying workforce needs.